To preach on kindness, I was kind of scared because how do you define kindness? Is it niceness to people? Is it being just nice and happy all the time? Because sometimes we're going to get down. Sometimes we're not going to be the nicest person in the world. I know that. I know that. My family knows that. I'm not always the nicest person. It's tough to define kindness because we don't always look at it the same way. We often think of it like love. We often think of it as in we need to love everybody. But that is a part of it, but it's not the whole picture here. In Titus 3, we see the layout of kindness. First, what we see is that we are all slaves to sin. We see in verse 3, "For we were once foolish ourselves, disobedient, deceived, enslaved to various lusts and pleasures." We were enslaved. We were slaves to sin. We are slaves to sin, and we're constantly rebelling against God. We are hardwired to sin, and we do hundreds, if not thousands, times a day. We just can't help it. That's just part of being human. We sin. But that sin is so severe, and sometimes we downplay it, don't we? Sometimes we don't understand the degree that our sin is affecting us. For one, we're enemies of God. I know it's tough to imagine that, but God, even though He loves us, we have to put ourselves across the battlefield from God. Now, we have a lot of people that have been in the military here. A lot of my family has been in the military, and I'll just say that we're proud of our military, right? We're the best. We have a great military. We're a superpower. We can take down anyone in the world. We're strong and we're confident. But the truth is that our military power is nothing to the power of God. We pale in comparison to God's power. And what we have done is put ourselves opposite of that. We have put ourselves against God as an enemy. James 4:4 says that, "You adulteresses, do you not know that friendship with the world is hostility towards God? Therefore, whoever wishes to be a friend of the world makes himself an enemy of God." We have placed ourselves on the other side of the battlefield, and sometimes we just don't even realize it. We don't even conceive the idea that our sin has placed us in a spot that we never want to go to. That a spot where if we actually think of it in this way, we'd want to run, we'd want to go back to the side God is on because we're against an enemy that we can't defeat. And because of that, because we place God on the other side of the battlefield, we placed ourselves as an enemy in front of Him, we deserve death. You all know Romans 6:23, "For the wages of sin is death." We have sinned, and we deserve death. It's pretty easy because we committed treason against God. We have offended God by our sin. We have offended God in a way where our sin is so severe that we deserve to die. We deserve to die physically, of course, and spiritually. It is something that we often don't think about when we think about sin. We don't think about the consequences of sin. We think, oh, well, everybody sins. We kind of downplay it. It's tough when you hear it 20 times a day, just from a Sunday school lesson. It's tough when you hear it all the time. I know the youth, we start Wednesday night Bible studies, and we're going through what, right now, it's question and answer time, basically. We're going through the question, what does Genesis have to do with me? And one of the big parts of Genesis is the fall of Adam and Eve. We talked a lot about Adam and Eve and how they were in the garden walking with God. They were walking with God, but they fell. They disobeyed Him and they sinned against Him. And the punishment sometimes doesn't seem like it fits a crime. We ate an apple or ate a fruit, and now we're cast out of the garden. It doesn't make sense. And when you think of it like that, of course it doesn't make sense. But if you think of it about the holiness of God and how holy He is and how we fell so hard just by committing one sin, then it makes a lot more sense in the whole scheme of things. We see Isaiah in Isaiah chapter 6. He has a vision. He has a vision with angels singing praises to God, saying, "Holy, holy, holy." We see Isaiah looking and envisioning the face of God and trembling. He's saying, "Woe is me, for I am a man of unclean lips, and I come from a people of unclean lips." He is terrified for his life, because he knows in comparison to God, he is nothing and he deserves death. Let's go back, and maybe it's a Bible school in me. I go back to a sermon by Jonathan Edwards, and maybe some of you read it, some of the youth might have read it in high school. It's one of my favorites. It's called "Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God." Now, we're depicted as a spider, and I'm telling you right now, I hate spiders. I was trying to go to sleep last night, and on the floor, I just see something in the corner of my eye just going across the floor, and I freak out. I mean, I jump on a chair, I get my shoe ready to smack that thing, and even then, this thing's maybe, this big. It's not big at all. And I'm sitting there and I'm frozen. I'm like, okay, what happens if it jumps back at me? Now, I don't know if spiders jump. I have no idea. But I don't want that spider jumping on me. That's one thing I know. I do not like spiders. I think they are disgusting. And I'm telling you right now, I crushed that thing and I was happy with it. Because if I didn't crush it, I couldn't have slept in that room. I'm telling you right now. But we're depicted as spiders in this sermon. Sinners in the hands of an angry God. We're a spider. And we're falling down into a pit of fire. Now, what happens when a spider goes into a pit of fire? They die. They burn up. And me personally, I'd say, good riddance. Go ahead. Let the spider fall. But God, out of his kindness and his mercy, grabs us by a thread. And we're hanging there above the flames. God grabbed us and saved us from that death, even though we're this disgusting, nasty spider that I myself would say, forget that, I'm not getting near that thing. But God saved us, even though we did that. Even though we are something disgusting, he saved us. And the truth is that he didn't just save us, he made us something new. No longer are we some nasty spider, we're a new creation. We're not just some disgusting, nasty, maybe hairy thing. I mean, I know the Daltons have a pet tarantula. Not my thing. I don't like that. I don't like spiders that, I definitely won't let a spider crawl on me. That's nasty. But we have been made something new. We see in verse 5 that we have been regenerated and renewed by the Holy Spirit. And more so, we see in verse 7, we become heirs through Christ. Just imagine this. We were slaves to sin. But when Christ came, and when we accept Christ, we can become heirs to Christ, through Christ. That's something amazing to me. That's something that reminds me of Joseph in the Old Testament, in Genesis. You remember the story of Joseph? He had the coat of many colors, right? That's how we know it. And we might saw a cartoon about it or a movie. Different stuff came out about it. But he was thrown in a ditch by his brothers. He was hated by his brothers. Thrown in a ditch. Sold into slavery. From there, he went to prison. But then, the strangest thing ever happened. I've never heard of this before. He came from prison and became second in command of all of Egypt. Now, I don't know if you know how big Egypt was back in the day, but they were popular. Second in command of Egypt was a big deal. He was living life large right there. He came from nothing to become this great ruler. But what you don't realize is that's every single one of us. We were slaves. We're prisoners to ourselves. But look, Christ came. Christ died for us. Christ rose again. And out of the kindness of God, he rose us to a position to where we're heirs through him. We don't have to have extravagant testimony to understand this. We don't have to all be stuck in this horrible sin where it seems like there's no way out, and then all of a sudden God takes us out of there. Like I said, I was 7 when I was saved. And I remember I was sitting on the couch you haven't committed any crazy sins when you're 6 or 5 or anything like that. I don't even remember times before I was probably 4 years old. That was probably my earliest memory. But the truth is that I committed sins. I committed so many sins. In comparison to God, I committed an infinite amount of sins compared to him. I set myself across the battlefield from him with even if I just committed one sin. There is no need to be extravagant in it. The miracle is that God sent his son to die on that cross for me. God sent his son to live a perfect life, to show me the way. And I accepted that. And that's a miracle in itself, that I became renewed in him, that I became a new creature, that I wasn't a spider anymore, but I was something more. Now, I don't know what you become from a spider, but maybe a butterfly or something. But I was something new. And that's important. That's very important because God showed that immense kindness to us. We were slaves. We deserved death. He saved us with his son. And he made us heirs through him. And because of that kindness, we should reflect kindness. We should reflect God's kindness that we felt in our life. Verse 8 says something right here. It says, "This is a trustworthy statement, and concerning these things I want you to speak confidently, so that those who have believed God will be careful to